All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive. We're going to explore something you might not think about every day, but it's a big deal in healthcare.
Yeah, safe handling practices for hazardous drugs.
Exactly. We're talking about protecting the people who handle these medications and patients who receive them.
And to guide us, we've got the USP 800 document.
It's like our rule book for this journey.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we won't bore you with all the technical stuff.
No, we're going to break it down.
We'll pull out the most important information, the stuff that really matters. So whether you work in healthcare, you're a patient, or just curious.
You'll understand the core of these guidelines.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how much goes into making sure these drugs are handled safely. It's a whole system.
Right. And I think a lot of people just picture, like, chemo, right?
Yeah, that's what most people think of.
But it's way more than that, isn't it?
Absolutely. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, keeps a list of all the drugs that fit the criteria. And it goes way beyond chemotherapy.
Okay, so, like, what else are we talking about? What kind of drugs make the list?
Think about drugs that could cause cancer, birth defects, or damage to organs, even in small amounts.
Oh, wow. Serious stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not just those powerful chemo drugs everyone thinks of.
Nope, not at all. You might be surprised to know even some common drugs, like allergy pills, can be considered hazardous.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on things like the dosage, how it's given, and the chances of exposure.
So it's not just about, like, a big still in a hospital or something.
Not just spills, no.
Yeah.
The USP 800 has this table. It outlines all kinds of ways someone could be exposed.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize.
Even receiving the containers those drugs come in can be a risk.
Seriously. Just the containers.
Yeah, and get this, even dust from pills can be a concern.
So even tiny amounts can be a problem.
That's why these guidelines are so strict. They're all about preventing exposure at every step. The USP 800 calls it the chain of protection.
Okay, chain of protection. I like that. So what are the links in this chain?
Well, first, you've got specially trained personnel. They're the only ones allowed to handle these medications.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what if someone forgets to wear their PPE or something? I mean, people make mistakes.
That's where the concept of double checking comes in. Even the most experienced healthcare worker can have a slip up.
Of course, yeah.
So the system requires another trained person to check everything before they give a dose to a patient.
So they're checking to make sure it's the right medication, the right dose, all that.
Absolutely. Right patient, too. All about minimizing those human errors.
Oh, that makes me feel better, honestly. It's good to know there's that extra layer of safety.
It's like a safety net,
Yeah.
but that's just one part of the fortress.
What else is there? What other kinds of protections?
Okay, so then you have these engineering controls, like negative pressure rooms.
Negative pressure rooms, what are those?
So imagine a room where the air pressure is lower than outside. If any particles get out, they're sucked back in, not floating out.
Wow, that's pretty high tech.
Yeah, it's like a science fiction containment unit.
It is. What else?
And then there are those specialized cabinets, the ones they use for compounding. They call them CPECs.
CPECs. Right, I've seen those in movies, I think. With the big gloves built in.
Yeah, they're designed to keep those hazardous drug particles contained.
But I'm guessing the PPE goes beyond just gloves, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Special chemo gloves. They're thicker, more resistant than regular gloves.
Ah, that makes sense.
And no regular scrubs. You need a full gown made of impermeable material.
So it's like suiting up for a hazmat situation every day.
You got it, and every single detail matters. The USP 800 makes that very clear. Each element in this chain is critical if one link breaks.
The whole system is compromised.
Exactly.
So we've got specially trained people, high-tech rooms and equipment, and serious PPE. What's next?
Now let's talk about compounding. This is where things can get risky. We're not just talking about taking pills out of a bottle.
Right, there's more to it than that.
Compounding involves all sorts of stuff. Crushing tablets, mixing liquids, preparing IV solutions.
More chances for spills and exposure then.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the USP 800 has all these rules for both sterile and non-sterile compounding. Specific equipment, procedures,
Makes sense.
even how long a compounded drug is good for. The BUD, the beyond use date.
Wait, so a compounded drug can expire even if it hasn't been used?
Exactly. All about safety and effectiveness. And here's something that might surprise you. Even where the sinks and water sources are placed is regulated.
Whoa, really? Why is that?
Because splashes and drips could contaminate the medications, they've thought of everything.
Wow, so it's a lot more complicated than just setting up a table in a room and calling it a compounding area.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the guidelines don't stop there. They also cover how those drugs are actually given to patients.
Okay, so now we're talking about administration. What kind of safety measures are involved there?
Well, for certain high-risk drugs, you have to use something called a CSTD,
A CST?
a closed system drug transfer device. Imagine a syringe that locks onto a vial so nothing leaks out during transfer.
Ah, so that protects the patient A and D, the person giving the medication.
Exactly. And even something as simple as crushing a tablet requires special procedures and PPE. You wouldn't believe how much dust can come off one pill.
I'm starting to get a picture of how intricate this whole system is.
It is, yeah. Every step needs attention to detail.
Okay, so we've talked about protecting patients and healthcare workers during handling and administration, but how do we know if it's all working?
That's where medical surveillance programs come in. They're designed to look for any health effects on the workers who regularly handle these drugs.
So are we talking like regular blood tests or something?
It's even more than that. It's like a health checkup tailored to exposure to hazardous drugs. Before a worker even starts handling them, they get a baseline assessment.
Oh, so we know what their health is like before any potential exposure.
Exactly, like a starting point for comparison.
Smart. So what happens after that?
Well, then there are periodic checkups to watch for any changes. Could be physical exams, blood tests, even lung function tests, depending on the drugs.
Makes sense. So they're keeping an eye on things, even if the worker feels fine.
Yeah, early detection is key. And they don't usually do blood or urine tests for drug levels routinely,
Right.
but they might do it in specific situations, like if there's been a spill.
Oh, so they can see if there's been any contamination.
Exactly. It's like detective work, trying to piece together the puzzle.
It's amazing how much they do to protect these workers.
It really shows how important their safety is. And we haven't even talked about the cleaning process yet.
Right. You mentioned deactivation and decontamination earlier. Sounds pretty intense. Is that what we're diving into next?
You bet. Cleaning up after handling hazardous drugs, it's a whole other level of detail.
Okay, my brain is officially full. All this stuff about hazardous drugs is fascinating, but also kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
But before we get to that whole cleaning process, you said it's pretty intense.
It is.
Anything else about those medical surveillance programs?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not just about monitoring, like reading for someone to get sick. It's also about preventing problems in the first place.
Proactive, right?
Exactly. They're always evaluating, always trying to improve the system.
So it's like they're constantly looking for ways to make it safer.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop, constantly improving things. The USP 800 really emphasizes that. Like, let's say a worker does start showing symptoms. The program doesn't just stop at treating them.
They try to figure out why it happened in the first place.
Exactly. What caused the exposure? Was there a problem with the engineering controls, the PPE, the training? Were the procedures followed correctly?
So they're not just treating the symptom, they're getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly. Trying to prevent it from happening again.
I like that. It really shows that they care about the health of the workers.
Absolutely. And that commitment continues even after someone leaves their job.
Oh, really? What do you mean?
The USP 800 recommends an exit exam when a worker leaves, even if they're going to a completely different field.
Why is that?
It's a chance to document their exposure history, from their whole time handling these drugs, and to address any health concerns that maybe weren't obvious before.
Like a final checkup just to be safe?
Yeah, exactly. Just to make sure they're leaving in good health, and they have a record of their potential exposures.
It's pretty amazing, honestly. All this detail, all this thought that goes into it.
It is remarkable. And, this is just scratching the surface.
Seriously, there's even more.
The USP 800 is our guide for today, but there's a whole universe of information out there.
So, where could our listeners go if they wanted to learn more?
Well, the USP 800 itself has a ton of references, guidelines from other organizations like the American Society of Health System Pharmacists,
Okay, yeah.
the Oncology Nursing Society. They go into even more detail on specific aspects of handling these drugs.
Wow, so there are whole organizations focused on this?
Oh, yeah, it's a whole specialty within healthcare. And don't forget the CDC.
The Centers for Disease Control.
Yeah, they have a whole section on their website about workplace safety and health, including hazardous drugs.
Great resource, the CDC website.
Absolutely. Always up-to-date information. But for our listeners who are just getting started with this,
Yeah,
the UST 800 is a great place to start.
for sure. So let's recap for a second. These guidelines, they go way beyond just spills, right?
Right. It's about minimizing exposure at every stage, from when the drugs arrive at the facility to disposal of the waste.
And it's not just physical safety either. We talked about those medical surveillance programs.
So important. They're monitoring the health of those workers, catching problems early.
It's really about protecting both the patients who get these medications and the people who give them.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But now, let's finally talk about that cleaning process we've been teasing.
All right, bring on the details. You mentioned deactivation and decontamination. What does it all involve?
All right, so picture this. You've just finished preparing a chemo medication in a CPAC, right?
Okay.
There might be tiny droplets or residue left behind. We need to make sure every surface is totally safe before we move on.
Right.
That's where deactivation comes in.
So that's the first step, deactivation. What are we actually deactivating, though?
We're basically neutralizing the drug itself, making it inactive, like disarming a bomb.
I like that analogy.
We got to make sure it can't cause any harm before we handle it further.
And how do you do that? Is there some special chemical you use?
We use specific agents, yeah. Depends on the drug.
Huh.
Sometimes it's oxidizing agents like peroxide.
Right.
Other times it might be something you're familiar with, sodium hypochlorite.
Wait, sodium hypochlorite, isn't that just bleach?
You got it. But using bleach in a hospital setting is a little different than wiping down your counters at home.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a lot more precise. You have to handle it carefully. Believe it or not, bleach can corrode stainless steel if it's not neutralized properly. Yeah, so even the cleaning agents can be dangerous if they're not used right. It's about finding that balance.
Between getting rid of the drug and making sure you don't damage the equipment.
Exactly. So after using sodium hypochlorite, we have to neutralize it with something else, like sodium thiosulfate.
To protect the equipment.
Exactly. Okay, so once we've deactivated the drug, then we move on to decontamination.
Okay, now I'm a little confused. What's the difference between those two? Deactivating and decontaminating.
It's a subtle difference, but it's important. Remember how I said deactivation is like disarming the bomb?
Yeah.
Decontamination is like cleaning up the debris. We've neutralized the danger. Now we're actually removing any residue left on surfaces.
Okay, so deactivation targets the drug itself. Decontamination is about getting rid of any traces that are left.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And we usually use specific cleaning agents for decontamination. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
I bet they have to test those cleaning agents pretty carefully.
Oh yeah, for sure. The USP 800 even recommends doing surface wipe sampling after decontamination.
Surface wipe sampling, what's that?
They literally swab the surfaces and then test them in a lab to make sure there's no drug residue left.
Wow, they're not taking any chances.
Nope. And this whole cleaning process, deactivation, decontamination, it all has to be done in a controlled environment, like a CPAC, to protect the worker.
Because they could still be exposed even during cleanup, right?
Exactly. And here's another thing about those CPACs. They have these areas underneath the work tray.
Oh, like those hard-to-reach spots that nobody wants to clean.
Yeah, but in this case, you have to clean them. The USP 800 says those areas should be cleaned at least monthly.
Wow, they really have thought of everything.
It's all about that chain of protection, making sure nothing is overlooked.
No weak links. So we've got deactivation, we've got decontamination. Are we done yet?
Almost. One more step, and it's super important in areas where they do sterile compounding. Disinfection.
Right, because in those areas, it's not just the drug residue, it's also bacteria and stuff like that.
Exactly. You got to make sure it's totally sterile.
So after you deactivate and decontaminate, you disinfect.
Yep. We use special disinfectants to kill any microorganisms, and of course, every step is documented.
Oh, so much work goes into cleaning, I never realized. But when you're dealing with hazardous drugs, it makes sense.
It's essential for safety, and it really shows how dedicated healthcare professionals are. They do all this every day to protect themselves, their colleagues, and their patients.
Absolutely. It's a whole other level of responsibility. So what's next in our hazardous drug journey?
Well, we've talked about identifying those drugs and the processes for compounding, administering, and cleaning up. But there's one more piece we need to talk about: medical surveillance programs.
Medical surveillance programs.
Yeah.
What are those all about? All right, so we've been through this whole world of precautions and procedures for hazardous drugs.
Yeah, a lot of steps involved.
But now let's talk about the people doing this work every day.
Right, the healthcare workers on the front lines.
You mentioned medical surveillance programs. What exactly are those?
Think of them like a safety net for those workers.
A safety net, okay.
They're designed to keep an eye on their health, catch any problems early on,
before they become serious.
Exactly. It's all about prevention and catching things early.
So not just waiting till someone gets sick, but actually trying to prevent it from happening.
Exactly. Like having a team of health detectives always on the lookout.
Okay, I like that analogy. So walk me through to what do these programs actually involve?
It all starts with a baseline assessment before a worker even starts handling hazardous drugs.
Ah, so you know what their health is like at the beginning.
Right. Gives us a snapshot, something to compare to later on.
Like a starting point.
Exactly. And then they have periodic checkups to look for any changes.
Makes sense. What kind of checkups are we talking about here?
Could be a few things. Physical exams, blood tests, maybe even lung function tests if they're working with drugs that could affect their breathing.
Oh, right, yeah.
Really depends on the person and the risks of their job.
So it's not like one size fits all?
Not at all. And here's something interesting. They don't usually do blood or urine tests for drug levels
Okay.
unless there's a reason. Like if there's been a spill or someone was accidentally exposed.
Oh, so then they actually look to see if the drug is in the worker's system.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out if there's been any contamination.
Like a CSI investigation?
Pretty much. They really go all out to protect these workers.
That's good to know.
And it's not just physical health either. These programs also address mental health.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, working with hazardous drugs can be stressful, especially if there's been an incident, a close call.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So these programs often include access to counseling, mental health resources, just to make sure the workers have support.
Right, because it's not just physically demanding, it's emotionally demanding too.
Exactly. They're taking a holistic approach. And these programs don't just help the workers, they help make the whole healthcare system safer.
How so?
Well, by keeping track of everyone's health, they might start to see patterns, things that could point to a problem with the safety procedures themselves.
Oh, I see. So if a bunch of people in the same unit start having similar problems, it could mean there's a flaw in the system.
Exactly. It's like a canary in a coal mine.
I get it. So the worker's health is a way to gauge how safe the whole system is.
That's a good way to put it.
Wow. This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. I mean, at first I was kind of freaked out by all the risks, but now I'm really impressed with all the systems they have in place.
I'm glad you found it interesting. It's a topic people don't think about much, but it's so important for making sure these medications are given safely.
Absolutely. So where should our listeners go if they want to keep learning about this stuff?
The USP 800 is a great start. And it mentions other good resources, too, like those guidelines from professional organizations.
Right, like the Oncology Nursing Society.
Yeah, and the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. And, of course, the CDC website.
Lots of great information there.
And, if anyone wants to learn more, I'd encourage them to reach out to their local hospital or pharmacy. They might have more info or even tours.
It's amazing to think that all this is happening every day in hospitals all over the place.
It really is. A lot of dedicated people working hard to make sure these medications are given safely.
Well said. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of hazardous drug handling.
I hope everyone listening learned something new and maybe even gained a little more appreciation for the people who do this work.
For sure. Until next time, when we'll explore another fascinating topic in the world of medicine and science.